in this panel, we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to make sure that we don't screw it up for cities and for the people who live in the cities. And I think the thing that is really apparent by all these conversations is how much all of these technological changes are going to affect people's day-to-day life, whether that's how they interact personally with their technology and change their own lifestyle to how the world changes them for them. And so I'm joined by three great folks who are going to help have this conversation today. Jeremy Gu is the senior data analyst from Uber. Elena Grewal is the head of data science for Airbnb. And Jarrett Wendt is the executive vice president, and this is the cool part of his title, president and head of CityNOW for Panasonic North America. And I'll tell you, I'm not a technology person. I was the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services in New York City when Mike Bloomberg was the mayor, and I'm now a principal at Bloomberg Associates, heading the Health and Human Services practice. And so we are municipal consultants. I like to say we're municipal therapists. And I work in the world where we're super data envious. We sit on troves and troves and troves of data, but at the municipal level, the barriers to actually getting our hands on that data internally and then sharing it are just enormous. And so these issues about how are we actually going to responsibly put that data, and particularly in the health and human services world when it's a lot of personal information, how are we going to put it into greater public use, and how are we going to overcome the barriers that are impeding our ability to use it collectively better for the public good? And so I actually am very interested in the questions that we're able to explore with our panelists. So, Jeremy, we're going to start with you. Thank you very much. And so, and this is a little bit of starting small and then sort of taking the lens out. So thinking first internally at Uber and thinking about all of the implications of how this technology transformation has changed the transportation world, hiring the right people, supervising them, and producing the right products is really critical. I mean, that team is the one who is defining what gets done. And so what do you think about? Like, what do you think about when you hire people, and what's important? What are the characteristics of the people that you want on your team?
Sure. So hiring is very important. It matters who you hire. So for me, I think the data scientists study three things: business, data, and algorithms. So we hope to find somebody who can work on all of the three components for data science. And one of the most valuable skills for data scientists is to identify and formulate a business problem. That's the first step. And then convert it to a data science problem, because business problem and data science problem, they speak two different languages. So a data scientist should speak both business and technical languages at Uber. That's a very, very important piece.
So translate that for us. Tell us how a business question, to me, Uber is nothing but data. So what is a business question, and how does that differ from a data question?
Sure. So for example, in these days, our biggest trend is to do automation. And automation saves the opportunity cost and improves the cost efficiency. For example, the work I'm doing is to helping the data scientists to run A/B tests, because we have thousands of A/B tests to run at Uber, and the data science need to spend hours to generate the A/B results. But our team built a platform for the entire organization to run the A/B tests automatically. We generated the A/B results automatically, so that the data science don't need to do the manual work anymore, because the platform does it very quickly. So that's one business problem, to help the data scientists and data analysts to run A/B tests automatically, save their time.
And how? So who is the right type of person to work on your team, and how do you supervise them to get the right results?
So to get the right results, we need to first understand their business needs. For example, some business teams, they care about to improve the customer experience. Some other teams focus on improve their team efficiency. So the first thing is to know what our customers really, really need. That's the first step. And the second step is to learn like whether our leadership support our work. For example, data science doesn't exist for its own purpose. Data science must solve a business problem. That's the key. And after we have everything, we need to sit down with the customers, with engineers, with the business teams, all together to have a consensus on the results and interpret the results from data together.
And how do you gauge what the customer is looking for?
So our customer for my team is helping the internal customers at Uber, like business teams from various backgrounds, like marketing, advertising, email campaign managers. So we will sit down with them, do several meetings, like what's the really pain points from your team. For example, we work with the EMEA team from Europe. Like their business question is how to improve their email campaigns through data science models. And I asked them like, what's the business metric, and how long would you use the data science models, and how do you deliver your results to your campaign managers or regional leaders in Europe? And how do we resolve the problem among different countries, like different culture, contexts, different languages? Like how do we address those problems in data science? So there are a bunch of meetings to discuss these questions.
And then, so Elena, let's go from there and think a little bit. I'd be interested in your reflections as well at Airbnb. I'm sure you have a lot of common experiences because your platform also is operating globally. But it's also the question about how it's not just the data scientists in the organization, but it's really the whole organization that needs to be pretty data savvy. And what do you think about in terms of how to set the culture within the organization to be responsible stewards of the data?
Definitely. Great. So first I can start by just saying a little bit about myself too. So I've been at Airbnb for about 6.5 years, and one of the really exciting things about this journey is we started with about 5 people on our data science team, and now we have 130. And if you look at one of my favorite websites is Google Trends. And so if you look at Google Trends and you search for data science, you can see that there's this line like this, and then it starts to go up like this. And it's right at 2012 when I started in data science that it starts to really skyrocket. So it's been really cool to kind of see the evolution of the industry as well as see it happening at Airbnb. And that's a correlation, not causation, that I was there at the start of data science. But yeah, and when I first came to Airbnb, I actually came from academia, and the thing that was really interesting to me was to think about answering questions using data, but then how do you translate that instantly into changing what the product is that then influences people's lives out in the real world. And so we think of our role as data science as both experts, and how do you do that? And we bring particular expertise that does require a depth of expertise to the table. And at the same time, we also know that the way that we can make the best decisions as a company will be for every single employee to know how to use data and to be able to answer their own questions, to be able to explore the data themselves. They have the best context about the problem they're trying to solve. And so we gain significant scale and leverage if we can actually empower the whole organization to use data. And so one of the things that we've done is instituted what we call Data University. So this was a program, actually since the very early days we had been teaching people. We had a program called School, S-Q-O-O-L. For those of you who know, SQL is like a common data language, so it's a pun. But we changed that about 1.5 years ago into this much larger program called Data University. And the goal of Data U is to bring data skills to everyone at the company. And so we have, as a part of your onboarding into the company, you get up to speed on what the offerings are. Depending on the department that you go into, there are actually some recommended courses for you to take. And we start from the very basics of how do you ask a good question. That comes to that point of, you can be asking a question and try and get data, but if you're not asking the right question, you're not going to get to the right answer. And so the very first class is actually just how do you ask a good question? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then pinpoint what kind of data you might need to answer that. And then we have subsequent classes, there's like 100 level series, 200, 300, to teach you how to get that data yourself and to be able to answer questions yourself and interpret graphs, use Excel, use some of the other tools that we have. And we've had over 1,400 employees now take Data University, and this has been extremely impactful for enabling the entire company to use data. We do targeted trainings for specific teams, and we've seen that significantly increases the usage of those teams to bring data into their decision-making process. And so, again, we want people to be seeking truth and being able to understand, okay, what am I trying to do? What does the data show to say if this is the right or wrong thing to do? And then, following along and saying, okay, now that we've done it, how do we understand what was the effect of what we did? And we similarly use tooling as well. So that's where we have an experimentation platform where we're able to run thousands of experiments at a time so that you can see, okay, did the thing that I tried make the difference that I thought it would, and be able to understand that impact and be able to actually do that yourself and not necessarily need even a data scientist to advise you, and to bring data scientists in when the problem truly is more complex and you really need that level of expertise. So that's been a...
So I want to, it's a follow-up, I think, for both of you, and Jarrett will get over there very soon.
I'm chilling.
Yeah. But, it's a little bit of, what is the process that you use internally to make sure that you are uncovering, if there's a truth to be uncovered? We all saw Rudy Giuliani, truth is not truth, but sometimes some people think there is truth. And how do you work both with your data science team and then in the larger organization to challenge yourself to not assume too much and to make sure that you're really poking at it hard enough and long enough to feel confident that you probably got to the right place? And so maybe, why don't we,
sure.
Elena, let's start with you, and then I would love to also hear from,
It comes back to that question, too, of training people not just how to look at data, but how to ask questions and to be curious and to have a kind of healthy skepticism about what they're trying to do, because it can be very easy to make assumptions. And so the way that you can leverage data is actually to test your assumptions, right? You have a hypothesis, and then you look at some data to see, was it right or wrong? One of the big challenges that we have that can often undermine or give you the wrong idea is actually that sometimes the underlying data quality is not as high as you would like it to be. So this is a constant struggle for us and for many companies. So you have to kind of have a healthy skepticism too about what the data is. I'll give you an example. So if you go to the Airbnb homepage, there is some code that logs, okay, someone has come to the Airbnb homepage. And let's say that is coded as, it has like a name and it's like homepage click. And if you go to our website on your mobile device, let's say you have an iPhone, that might be coded as homepage click with like a capital H. And so if that's the case, and then you're looking at trying to count homepage clicks, and you don't know that, then you've got a problem because you're probably not counting the right number of homepage clicks. And so we've really been doubling down on how do we build systems so that we can catch that before that happens and make sure that that doesn't happen. But the reality is that probably whatever perfect system you have, there will be some instances where something is not quite right. And so, having that healthy skepticism of, okay, like, am I looking at the data in the right way? Is the underlying data what I think it is? Is it correct? And how do I kind of look at the data in different ways to figure that out? And it's interesting, actually, when we hire a data scientist, one of the first things that we did when I started was, I came from academia, and a lot of the data sets were very clean, actually, because they had been funded and cleaned, and there was a lot of work that went into cleaning them before we used them. And so I came to Airbnb, and I was like, whoa, this needs a lot of cleaning, and it was a startup, so it makes sense. But we had a take-home challenge that we would give data scientists, and we'd give them data, and you'd have to analyze the data and then send it back, and that was part of our interview process. And we actually put in bugs in the data where we had duplicate rows, we had things that were miscoded, because we wanted to make sure that the people we were hiring had that healthy skepticism and were going to catch when something might not be quite right. And so that was actually a key part of testing for people who were going to be careful.
And it sets the culture too, right? It sends the signal to those who you hire. And Jeremy, any other reflection just on that?
Yeah, I have 2 points to add. The first thing is that data cannot solve all the problems. So the data scientists advise our leaders which data or which problem can be solved with data. That's the first piece. The second piece is that even within the data science, there are different disciplines, like people from economists, like data scientists whose background is in statistics, or who is a mathematician, who is a computer scientist. They are all from different backgrounds, and they have different approaches to the same data science problem. So how do we get the consensus from everyone, even they all claim they are data scientists? So that's the piece I want to add.
Yeah. And how do you draw on the richness of those different backgrounds to get toward, instead of having them all fighting and taking a different position, to actually say this is how it actually, when it comes together, can really create a fuller exploration.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So Jarrett, I think in some ways these two conversations really get us to the point of thinking about how we as data producers, all the companies that are now accumulating more and more and more information, the incredible potential of that if all of that information was in the public realm and capable of being accessed by, for me, I think about in city government, how incredibly useful that would be to me in fighting poverty if I had, all this information about what's going on with people and, of course, with the, all of the privacy protections and ethical use of data, but it's just not out there. It's just not happening. But you've been telling us, as we've been preparing for this discussion, about a transformation that we're on the brink of in the transportation world. So I want you to share that with folks so that we can think about how we can all follow suit and what are the tricks that need to be deployed in order to get to the place that you're experiencing now.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first, this is the quietest eating group of all time, or you're enthralled with the conversation. I'm hoping it's the latter. Unbelievably quiet. Great job. So a couple of things I think that, I'll take it to the 20,000-foot view. We've been talking a lot about data and data science and the implications, and I think for those of us that are not data scientists, I look at macro trends and we're responsible for a few things. In transportation and mobility, we are no doubt on an inflection moment in time. You just heard about autonomous level 4, level 5. I was surprised by your reaction and how quickly you think level 5 is going to head us. That's pretty incredible in this room, but we're seeing a couple of things. 10 years ago, it was really the Audis and Mercedes of the world that had contextual information that was readily available via sensors. And now it is any entry-level vehicle into the industry that is giving us disproportionate amount of information out of the vehicle. And what does that mean is that it's capable of disseminating, traction control, speed, heading, trajectory, all the common things, but it's also airbags deployed. If you're skidding a little bit, all of these indicators that are contextual information. And why is that important for us in the macro data space? Connected vehicles are upon us. So starting in 2020, this is not a fantasy land. Coming off the assembly line, tens of millions of vehicles beginning in 2020 are going to have connected vehicle technology, which to be very clear is different than autonomous, right? A connected vehicle just means that they're communicating 10 times per second, which is incredible. But there's also a huge dissemination of information that can be pulled out of that vehicle as those sensor-based technologies that I talked about needs to sit somewhere. So to your point, what we're seeing in history right now is that there's traditionally been siloed-based approaches to these industries, particularly in transportation. If you're a Department of Transportation, the last time you sat down with an OEM or an automotive manufacturer was probably Henry Ford, saying, hey, I've got cars, it's a Model T, what's up with the horses? And they haven't talked since, really. And right now we're seeing in this inflection moment where DOTs and OEMs are sitting down and having a communication about a common platform and shared data. 10 years ago, the idea was to gather and control data and own data, so it's somehow to find a way to monetize data. And in these public spaces, particularly where safety is concerned, connected vehicle, when everybody knows the autonomous vehicle is upon us, the implications of that are catastrophic if we don't do this right. And so what we're seeing in this trend is breaking down these silos and having departments of transportation, municipalities, and OEMs talking about the data, the standardization of that data, the open API platforms of that data, so that if there's an 11-year-old in the basement that's writing code for an application that can sit on a platform that changes everybody's lives for the better, we make sure that happens. I would tell you that 10 years ago, the conversation where an OEM sitting down with a DOT and a municipality having a conversation about standardization of data and an open atmosphere so that we could share this data, so that we could change our lives for the better. Sadly, I will tell you that over the last 4 or 5 years, and the advent of the cell phone certainly has helped for the worse. We are up to 41,000 traffic deaths last year. That was up from the year before. That was up from the year before. And this type of technology requires the shared resources of these data, not just the siloed organizations and ownership of data. It requires us to work together. And I guess from our line of sight, the good news is that we're seeing those silos be systematically broken down for the first time.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit more about what creates the conditions of that shared environment that can give rise to this? Because it's because I think everybody's in their own corner saying it's mine and you can't have it.
Yep. It's an interesting point, and I would tell you that in this era of entrepreneurialism, I think that we're clearly in the middle of it. Companies like mine have to continue to find a way to be relevant. And I think the relevance that a large $75 billion company can bring is that we've been a tier 1 automotive supplier for 60 years, as an example. And having the conversation with a bigger stick moves the needle further than if it's startup-based or small business-based. So I think that that's the job of the larger companies, is to kind of swing the heavier stick so that you can bring the major OEMs to the table and you can kind of coagulate this into something more meaningful. I will tell you that absolutely, if you're the big 6 automotive groups, and this is not news to anybody in the room, figuring out how your new business model is going to be relevant with the Ubers of the world and with autonomous coming upon us, forces you to rethink that siloed organizational, it's mine approach to data, and saying, how do we make people safer, and how do we make our brand more relevant, more approachable, and how do we transform for the next 50 years? It's absolutely required company, including ours, to rethink things. I can tell you from a data perspective, the whole idea of an open API platform was foreign 10 years ago to a company like mine, and now it's all we do.
So if the higher moral value of that sharing doesn't get you, then there is a business bottom
100%.
line from a consumer point of view of wanting to know that that's what the company I'm buying my product from stands for.
Or you may not exist because you're not playing in that atmosphere anymore, right? If you're systematically refusing to do that, you will find yourself irrelevant.
And do you think this is going to transcend the transportation world?
100%. It already is. Multiple DOTs are already engaged in setting standards at the US DOT level. OEMs are coming for the first time wanting information to be pierced into the vehicle, into the human interface for the first time ever, anecdotally. If there's an active work zone, I use this because it's the easiest example, because humans get killed all day, every day in active work zones. Right now you have to go by a static road sign that says work zone ahead for the next 10 miles. I've been driving forever, and do I pay attention to that? Does that mean something to me? I can tell you it doesn't. But if that's pierced into your vehicle and it gives you an alert that says there's 11 humans in lane 1 and lane 2 starting in a mile, active alert, some sort of trigger event happens in the vehicle, you may pay attention a little bit more. And so I think that the roadway operators working with the OEMs for the first time to figure out what this means in the real world, to help affect those changes where human lives matter, is why it's happening.
And do you think government has a role in instigating that and maybe even mandating that? Or do you think the industry is going to move it fast enough that we're not going to need governmental entities to force the conversation?
That is a dangerous question these days to answer. Current administration would argue that industry should decide. And as I mentioned earlier today, multiple OEMs are making those announcements of tens of millions of vehicles being equipped with connected vehicle technology beginning in 2019 actually at the tail end, through 2025. So it'll be ubiquitous, right? There was a thought that it should be standardized like the seatbelt in 1979, right? And it's interesting what happens with cities, and I know that this is near and dear to you as well. We can pull out of the Paris Accord. We can do things that say, hey, this is not what this administration is about. But then you go down to the governor and the mayoral level, and they're systematically making those improvements and mandates and changes on the individual level. So I think when it's so obvious, and I mentioned those 41,000 traffic deaths, most of which can be mitigated with connected vehicle technology alone. Not forgetting about infrastructure, forgetting about the infrastructure back into the vehicle, just the vehicle-to-vehicle communication. I think when it's so obvious and it's upon us, and there's enough of a push from those heavy hitters, that's when change happens. So I suppose that's a little bit of a cop-out. It's not meant to. I suppose my personal opinion is that I think it should be mandated. But even if it's not, you're seeing these major folks make decisions regardless.
And we see this, I mean, in the health and human services. I just think about the enormity of the data that's out there around what's going on with populations in need,
Yep.
and we're losing the benefit of saving lives over and over and over again for lack of being able to get people to let go of their data, much less figuring out, doing the hard work of doing the integration and looking for the patterns of behavior. That
Cities are absolutely going into this eyes wide open these days. With your newly elected mayor or governor, I guarantee you they're looking at the ways these macro trends are happening with data, and it's not about owning that data. It's about releasing it and letting the public figure out what to make a value out of that. It may be different than if you're trying to understand what's going into your website or drive more revenue or figure out how to advertise. To me, it doesn't have to be the same. When it's for the public good or it's attacking these huge macro issues, public ownership and having the access to that so that you can figure out things on your own or hopefully add value is absolutely where we're at.
Amen. It's very optimistic. I'm with you.
I remain there. I'm not leaving. I'm going optimistic.
Anything you, either of you would like to add to that before we go? We have a, oh, look at flashing zero.
Yeah, no,
we have one last polling question, but just any reflection on that last exchange?
Yeah, I guess to think about opening things up, I think that's really, really interesting and very important. And it's something that, coming back to the data science side too, one of the really cool trends that we've been seeing is people not just sharing data, but also sharing how they analyze the data in a much more transparent way. So not just publishing a paper without access to the data, without access to the code, but saying, okay, here's the data, here's the code, here's the output. And then that creates so much more transparency and so much more ability for people to build off of it, which is really great.
Yeah. I think my last piece is that no matter it's a company or it's a government, we wanted to build the data science to make the city smarter, safer, and make people happier. Like Uber, we offer people like reliability and efficiency when they need a car, whenever it is. So I figure that in the future, I would think about to make the people in the city live better and better. That's the direction of data science.
That's pretty fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to Jeremy, Elena, and Jarrett.
Okay.
And one last question of the day. I'm trusting it'll come up. Where do you think cities should focus the resources first to incorporate smart technology? So we have traffic congestion and pollution, connecting local citizens, computer programming and education in the schools, energy efficiency and green initiatives. It's still clicking. My option's not there.
I thought we should add E, all of the above.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Great. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, beautiful. Reducing traffic congestion. Jared, I think you had an effect on the crowd. Right. Beautiful. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.